Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please take a seat. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. It's a crisp fall morning. My name is Janet Evans, and I'm pleased to be your worship leader for today's service. I do have one Sunday service announcement. The annual auction is in full swing, and it's UUCB's biggest fundraiser, and we really need everybody to participate to make it a success. So now's the time to add your items and place your bids. This year, everything is online. The link is on UUCB's website and in this week's messenger. Now, we welcome all at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. All of you are welcome, and all of you are sacred. Whatever your past was like, whatever this present moment is like for you, we invite you to journey into the future together. I want to welcome all of you who are joining us via the magic of the internet. The chat box will be open if you need to get a message to us. If you are a new or online visitor, please email our office administrator, Amy Zen, and let us know how you found us. You will find her email listed in the Zoom chat. Our church website also has a great deal of information about UUCB, our programs, and our activities. Okay, now please ensure your microphones remain muted, your electronic devices are silenced, and join us with others gathered for worship.
Good morning. It's good to be here today. I'm Reverend David Schwartz, minister, one of the ministers here. And it's good to be with you. This is the first long underwear service of the year. This is, in a lot of the other weeks, the 9:15 had a lot more people than it did this week. Well, we've got 2 more weeks of outdoor services. And then on the 31st, we move indoors. We'll live stream from inside the sanctuary, but unfortunately, we'll live stream with just our worship leaders and our musicians. And we'll be watching the COVID incidence rate, and the magic number we're looking for is 50 per 100,000 per week in Boulder County. 50 positive cases. Yep. And we were there in July. We can get back there again. But I'm saying it both to give you a heads up and to say this is not what any of us wanted or expected for this fall. And it stinks. I don't say that too often from the pulpit. But it's like the old question of the chicken and the egg. I'm going to tell you one dad joke and then we'll actually start the service. You know which came first, the chicken and the egg? Safety always comes first. If we had the full drum kit, you'd get that. Thank you. All right, friends, here we go. There is a pattern. There is a way of being. There is an expectation in American life, maybe otherwhere too, which says that if you have enough, that's what matters. If you maximize your own self-interest, that's what's going to make everyone okay. It's a pattern that says what matters the most is how are you doing? And once you're okay, you're done. And if your outsides look good, don't worry about your insides. And if the face you show to the world looks strong and competent and together, it doesn't matter how you feel on the inside. I don't know if you'll allow me this language, but that is about as close to blasphemous as you get in Unitarian Universalism. I am because we are. Each of us people of inherent worth and dignity and part of an interconnected web from which we are not excused to go stand in our corner. I am because we are. In all our complexity and our wholeness, in all our brokenness and our healing, none of us perfect, none of us so broken. The mission of this church, to grow as people, to help to heal the world, to connect bravely means connecting both with each other and the world outside these walls, these boundaries, but also connecting bravely and loving always yourself too, which often is harder work.
Let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart shine through. Let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart shine through. Love upon love upon love, all hearts beating as one. Light upon light upon light, all disappear into one. Let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart shine through. Let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart shine through. Love upon love upon love, all hearts beating as one. Light upon light upon light, all disappear into one. Let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart shine through. Let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart shine through. Love upon love upon love, all hearts beating as one. Light upon light upon light, all disappear into one. Let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart shine through. Let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart shine through.
Let me share this reflection with you about being a people of curiosity. At the earlier service with our grade school kids, I straight up tried to fool them about what I'm going to tell you. We'll see if you fall for it, though. I want to tell you about a little-known species. It is the Pacific Northwest tree octopus. The Pacific Northwest tree octopus, Octopus pexarbilus, can be found in the temperate rainforests of the Olympic Peninsula, and these solitary cephalopods reach an average size measured from arm tip to mantle tip of 30 centimeters. And unlike most other cephalopods, the tree octopus is amphibious. It spends only their early life and part of the mating season in the ancestral aquatic environment, the waters of the Puget Sound. Reaching out with each of her 8 arms covered in sensitive suckers, a tree octopus might grab a branch to pull herself along in a form of locomotion called tentaculation. Or she might strike an insect or a small vertebrate, steal an egg from a bird's nest. You guys have heard of the Pacific tree octopus, right? There it is in all its glory. Now, the tree octopus is not listed on the endangered species list, but its numbers are at a critically low level. During the early 20th century, the tree octopus was prized by the fashion industry as an ornamental decoration for hats, leading greedy trappers to wipe out entire populations to feed the vanity of the rich. And it's long since outlawed, but that has an impact on a population over time. Efforts were made to preserve the habitat, but it was met with resistance from the timber industry, which has long viewed the tree octopus as a threat, because octopodes value the moss-covered, wet, old-growth forests, which are also the most lucrative sources of lumber. And octopuses hiding among the trees would often gum up sawmills and stain pulp vats with their ink. To this day, misunderstanding and fear of these gentle creatures, it can still be found among many old-timers. And the special octopus separators that you find at sawmills today have largely helped stabilize the species. All right. For clarity, this is not a real thing. I told this to someone once, and they came up to me after, and they're like, I never knew about these. I was like, no, you've missed the point. The campaign to save the Pacific Northwest tree octopus began about 15 years ago in a website to teach school kids critical thinking, to teach them that just because something appears on the web with authentic-looking photos of loggers at anti-octopus rallies and octopodes perched on the hat of fashionable 1920s women, just because it looks authoritative, just because it uses the scientific name for the non-existent thing and technical language like locomotion by tentaculation, it doesn't mean that the thing is true. In part, it's designed as a joke to remind us that we can get ourselves fooled pretty easily. And maybe if you know something about octopi, you see through this one pretty quick. But out there will be other things that we run into that aren't so quick to see through. So I started by saying we're a people who are curious. And when something doesn't sound quite right, if we can't explain why, we get more curious. The trick of the website, the technical language, the old photos, is a pattern that tries to shut down your curiosity, present you with a common sense sort of understanding and feel so that you don't wonder and you just take it at face value. And whether it's the Pacific Northwestern tree octopus or whether it's any number of stories that we tell ourselves about who we are and what we're about, when something doesn't sound right, let's get curious.
Friends, if you're joining us online and have a candle or a chalice near your computer, please get ready to light it. We invite you to type into the chat box where your chalice is lit, the street or neighborhood or what city, if you're joining us from outside Boulder County. Now I'd like to invite Will Kropp to light this morning's chalice.
Good morning, friends. Mitakie Owasi. Let me repeat that. Mitakie Owasi. A loose translation, we are all related. The Lakota, particularly the Oglala people of Pine Ridge, are a proud and generous people whose ancestry dates back thousands of years. They are well known for their gifted horsemanship, rich culture, and connection to the land and spirit. All this despite a history of genocide, broken treaties, and extreme poverty. I suspect that most of you are like me. I can wrap my brain around this intellectually. But it took until July of 2019 when Reverend Dana and the Teepee Raisers nonprofit began to carve out a little piece in my heart. Their mission to alleviate conditions of poverty, honor Indigenous wisdom, reconcile our shared history, and empower youth is very powerful. You may remember the Lakota riders that came up on their horses and invited us into a drum circle under these very trees. So on the morning of October 23rd, 2020, my youngest son Darby and I drove up to South Dakota. We were loaded down with a vehicle full of donations from this church. And we were very wary of what we were getting into. That same day, 40 new cases of coronavirus were recorded in the county we were headed to, and elders were considering a reservation-wide shutdown. It became the first of many visits. We hauled food and supplies gathered by UUCB and did a wide variety of volunteer activities, like woodcutting and splitting, a barn raising of sorts, food distribution, setting up veggie gardens, built a fence to protect the Wounded Knee Memorial Site. On one trip, our group was invited to share in an anipi, a traditional Lakota sweat lodge, a powerful experience. What made such service worthwhile was the budding relationships that we are still nurturing today. The stories of culture and wisdom from Mary Weaselbear, Nabi Bell, and others. That nurtured my heart and my soul while doing that hard, unending work. UUCB's justice work for climate action, Sanctuary Now, and other areas is predicated on strong relationship. As I look forward to my upcoming trip back to Pine Ridge this December, I light this chalice for all of the relationships that we must nurture to enact justice. Mitakie Owasi.
We now invite all those gathered in your various locations to join together in fellowship and in community as we all say aloud our congregation's covenant. So please just repeat each line after me. We gather in fellowship to speak truth to each other. To reach out and touch one another. To care with each other. And to seek the truth divine. So be it.
Friends, I invite you to enter in a spirit of listening, a time of prayer and meditation, a time for recentering. We'll begin that with one big, deep breath all together. And another. We pause in this moment to listen for and look for all the ways that our lives are woven together with people who we know well and care for, with people who we don't yet know. How our lives are woven into the generations of ancestors that came before us, and how we pass this world forward to the ones who come after us. On this Indigenous Peoples Day weekend, our hope and our prayer, especially for those of us who are white folks, especially for those of us who were raised with stories of courageous pioneers coming to settle an empty landscape, especially for all of us who grew up with stories that didn't name colonizers as colonizers. Our hope and our prayer this morning is to get comfortable not knowing and to get curious, to seek to understand first, to let go of our own defensiveness, to let go of any guilt or shame that we might carry, that we went through life so many years not knowing these things, not knowing the reality of the experience of the Indigenous people of this country. Our hope and our prayer this morning, always, in a moment like this, when we could get stuck looking inwards, is instead to turn outwards, to get curious, to seek the real history of this land, here in our neighborhood and our state and our nation. When we could get stuck inside ourselves, trying to justify what we've always heard, our hope and our prayer instead is to be curious in relationship, to make the trip up to Pine Ridge, not to save or to fix, but first of all, to be in relationship with real people, with Native Americans who don't belong to a historical past, but to a present and to a dawning future. Our hope and our prayer this morning is to stay curious. Amen. Each week when we gather, in ritual we enact the work of sharing our lives and weaving them together. Each one of us brings with us joys and sorrows, hopes and cares and concerns. And for those of you gathered in person, as the music begins in a moment, I invite you to come forward and to place a stone, these smooth stones from Boulder Creek, into the sacred earth, the land which was and is the land of the Ute and Arapaho peoples. And in doing so, to symbolize the way each of our individual cares and hopes takes their place among a larger whole. Folks we may not know, struggles we may never learn about, but nonetheless that unite us. And for anyone joining online, I invite you, share in the chat if there's a joy or a sorrow that you'd like me to share back with those gathered here today.
Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again, return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return again, return to what you are, return to the home of your soul. Born again, return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again, return to who you are, return to what you are, return to
for all those blessings and concerns that we've shared here in ritual, as well as those that remain silently on our hearts. We hold this compassionate space with love. To these stones that you've shared, I add the news that Craig Williamson, whose mother was Valerie, our director of religious education back in the 70s. Craig Williamson, who was raised in the church and participated in the 9th grade trip when Barb and Fred were leading it, died from a heart attack this week. We hold him and his family and each other in love. Thank you for each and all of the ways that you bless each other.
Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again, return again, return again, return to the home of your soul.
On January 6th, 1995, at 2:45 p.m., Mr. MacArthur Wheeler, age 44, walked down a maple tree-lined street in the Brighton Heights neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He reviewed his robbery plan, squinted his eyes against the cold, took a breath, and stepped into the bank. That robbery and the next one went as uneventfully as a bank robbery can. No one was hurt by Wheeler, who carried a gun but no mask or disguise, and even smiled up at the security cameras on the way out. Well, it took until April of that year for the surveillance photos to make it onto the 11 o'clock news from detectives looking for leads. And it was less than an hour after the broadcast that they arrested him at his home, where he was deeply confused about how they found him. He told them this, which seemed inexplicable at the time. He said, "I wore the lemon juice." "I wore the lemon juice. How did you find me?" A police spokesman explained later, someone told Wheeler, that if you put lemon juice on your face, it makes you invisible to surveillance cameras. All right, he was skeptical of this when he heard it, so he tested it out like you would. He put lemon juice all over his face. It burned his eyes. It burned. He was having trouble seeing. But he used a Polaroid camera. This is 1995. So he used a Polaroid camera to take a selfie covered in lemon juice. And maybe he turned his face away. Maybe he pointed the camera. Maybe the film was bad. But when the Polaroid came out and he was no longer, he was nowhere to be seen on it, it was quite clear to him that the lemon juice worked. And so he smiled up at the security cameras on his way out while squinting through the lemon juice covering his face. Charles Darwin wrote, "Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge." I don't think any of us is going to rob a bank while wearing lemon juice. If that's something you're considering, that is the sort of thing to talk with your minister about. But I would bet that all of us, sooner or later, we fall into spiral traps of thinking. I bet we fall into traps inside our own heads that turn out to be equally absurd. I bet we come to believe things about ourselves as absurd as the notion that lemon juice will hide you from security cameras. Things like, I'm not good enough. I don't belong. Something is broken in me deep down inside. Stuff's as absurd as lemon juice, even though it might sound a lot more plausible to you some days. We get stuck in these same habits. And all this gets put in a starker way in this poem called Barn Fire. Barn Fire, it starts somehow in the hot damp, and soon the lit bales throb in the hayloft. The tails of mice quake in the dust, the bins of grains, the mangers stuffed with clover, the barrels of oats shivering individually in their pale husks. Animate and inanimate, they know with the first whiff in the dark. And we knew, we should have, that day. The calendar refused its nail on the wall, and the crab apples hurling themselves to the ground. Only moments, and the flames, like a blue fist, curl all around the black. There's some small bleeding from the calves, and the cow's nostrils flare only once more, or twice above the dead, dry metal troughs. No more fat tongues worrying salt licks. No more heady smells of deep green rising from the silos, rising now like two huge twin chimneys above it all. With the lofts full, there's no stopping, nor even getting close. It will rage until dawn and beyond, and the horses, because they know they're safe there, the horses run back into the barn. Friends, we come to believe things about ourselves as absurd as the notion that lemon juice will hide you from security cameras, and we act on them as unthinkingly as horses that run back into a burning barn for safety. Things like, the way you feel on the inside is the way you really are, but the way everyone else looks on the outside is the way they really are. So you compare and despair. Things like you don't belong and you're not good enough. You're broken. Maybe you fall into that negative self-talk. Maybe you treat yourself in a way you'd never treat a guest. Maybe you replay old tapes of disappointments. Or falling asleep, you browse through a library stocked with secret shames. We fall into that kind of thinking without even knowing that it's happening, without even realizing it. Online, there's a whole art and science devoted to tricks designed to take advantage of our ability to fool ourselves. These are called dark patterns. Dark patterns are websites and apps that use your expectations and common sense to trick you into doing what they want. Have you ever tried to unsubscribe from a mailing list? But I'm thinking, I don't know what company this is, but there's one of them. I run into this sometimes. I unsubscribe, and it takes me to a page where there's a list of topics. And it says, select the topics you're interested in. As if what I need to do is to select all the stuff that I don't want anymore, and then press enter. Except down at the bottom of the screen, in teeny little letters, it says, you have been successfully unsubscribed. And those checkboxes are actually resubscribing to the thing all over again. It's a bait and switch. Or there's the Roach Motel pattern. It's easy to get in and hard to get out. You can subscribe to the Wall Street Journal with a click of a button, but you can only unsubscribe by calling them on the phone, where someone is going to try very hard to get you to change your mind. Easy to get in, hard to get out. That's a Roach Motel. And then there's the sneak into the basket pattern. You're in the process of buying one thing, and the website tries to sneak in another thing. Amazon keeps trying to get me to buy equipment protection plans for like a $2 charging cord. No. Don't sneak in anything else. Hidden costs distract you from initial low prices that turn out to be high. God help you if you try to figure out the price difference between Southwest with no baggage and Delta with one bag. These dark patterns on websites, they trick us into acting against our own best interests. And in just the sort of way that that you can point to that stuff out there. You can point to it online. We can take a look at the Pacific tree octopus and see how it works. We have mental dark patterns. We have patterns of thought and behavior that trap us in just the same sort of way. These knee-jerk, these reflexive patterns of thinking that cut us off from ourselves and from each other. I'm thinking of purity and perfection. Purity and perfection is a roach motel. It is very easy to get into that sort of thinking and way of being, and it is very hard to get out of it. Purity and perfection, the need to get it right all the time, quickly becomes fear, terror of being wrong, of being found out. You have to show less and less of your whole real self, which of course makes mistakes. You have to explain every mistake you made and why it's not really your fault. You have to fight off the shame of it all the time and walk around in this armor of defensiveness. We fall into that thing and it's easy to get stuck there. And like that, the instinct toward individualism is a dark pattern. Individualism is like a sneak into basket. Someone tells you, hey, what a great dinner. What a lovely home. What a great job on that project. What wonderful music today. And then your brain tries to sneak this other stuff into the basket along with the compliment. This is all about me. This is only about me. What can I do to get more credit? How do I get this hit of dopamine again? How do I isolate and go it alone? Your brain starts to tell you if you need something done, you better do it yourself. I'll give you one more. Objectivity in human relations. Objectivity in human relations is a dark pattern. You're talking with someone and you're trying to establish just the facts, but what sneaks into the basket along with it are things like, don't trust your own emotions. You can't be right if you feel strongly about something. Or surely someone isn't thinking clearly if they're upset. It must not matter. I was texting with a friend a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying they're having a hard day. You know, they're really struggling. They're talking about bad weather in their head. You know, negative self-talk, negative emotions, all this. And they wrote to say, I feel like my brain is really trying to mess me up today. But they misspelled it. There was a typo that didn't get caught, and it said, I feel like Brian is really trying to mess me up today. And that became the running joke for all those times when they or me, you know, we started to notice those patterns in ourselves, those habits, those unhealthy habits we're falling into. We'd say, oh man, Brian is really at it today. Because it's easy to fall into that. The barn fire starts, the whole building's ablaze, and you run back into the barn because that's where it feels safe. I think part of the way out of that is curiosity and empathy, and especially compassion. These are the things that we bring into relationship with each other at our best. Curiosity and empathy and compassion. This is part of how we build relationships. By saying, who are you? What are you about? What's going on here? And listening carefully. I wonder sometimes, what would it be like if you treated yourself the way you would treat a dear friend, instead of spiraling when things get hard? But if curiosity and empathy and compassion are the tools, they still only work to the degree that you're aware of what's going on inside your own head. They only work to the degree that you're watching out for what Brian is up to today. Even the folks, you all who easily see that the tree octopus is not a real thing, we can get stuck in our heads. And as easy as it is sometimes to notice this in other people, to say, why are you beating up on yourself? It can be a lot harder to say that to ourselves. The Franciscan priest and writer Richard Rohr talks about the value of an internal malware scan. So your computer does this all the time. It scans through the whole contents of your hard drive, looking for software that's not supposed to be there, malicious software, malware. He says this, scanning for spiritual malware is a practice worth doing several times a day. Take a moment to sit quietly and watch the screen of your mind and heart so you can recognize what's occupying them, what's driving them, just as software runs the computer. And in time, you start to get good at sensing, at recognizing, when are you flowing out with a positive, with a generous energy? When are you sucking in with a stingy, complaining, angry energy? That's the malware. And he says, look, without this conscious scan of what's going on in you, oftentimes hidden and well-disguised malware is going to control the entire experience. But most importantly, he finishes this way, and I want to dwell on this for a minute because this is, I think, the hardest thing too. He says, you run your scan over your heart and mind, not to judge or hate or condemn parts of yourself. Not to judge or hate or condemn, which is itself malware running in your Brian, but just to see the problem instead. To see the problem and install some new firewalls. Cultivating that compassion toward yourself in the same way that you extend it outward. Richard Rohr doesn't say, when you find things that are keeping you stuck, I'm so disappointed in you. He comes at it with gentleness, not either or thinking. You're not either well or unwell. All of us are hurting and all of us are healing all the time. He says, look, being human means this malware is going to run. It's going to try to trick and trap us. It's going to try to keep us stuck inside ourselves, stuck in shame or anger, whatever it is, stuck performing a role, stuck replaying old tapes from childhood. So instead, you run the scan. What makes a dark pattern dark on a website or in your own head is that you fall into it without noticing what's going on. And so we come at this thing with curiosity about ourselves too. The physicist Richard Feynman says the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person for you to fool. When I think about running that scan, I don't think of it quite as being smart enough to do it. I don't think of it as trying to outwit myself as much as trying to outwise myself. That I can be wise enough to stay curious. That I can stay empathetic enough to know that being human means being human. That I can stay connected enough on a good day to think that the same way I want to be in relationship with other people, with empathy and compassion and curiosity, is a way to be in relationship with myself too. And it's not about being perfect or pure. It's not a referendum, and a malware scan like that is not about giving your brain a letter grade. Instead, it's to wake our wisdom and build a healthy relationship with the self, just the same as we work to connect bravely and love always with each other. Amen.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this this rose will open, I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open.
This month, we share our offering plate with Intercambio. And while teaching English is the core of what Intercambio does, how they do this work is what unleashes the potential of individuals and our community. Teaching English the Intercambio way creates new, meaningful relationships. So here's a story. As a young girl, Katja Sogomonyan learned about the Statue of Liberty, but she never thought she would see it with her own eyes or experience the freedom that it symbolizes. Katja was born in Armenia and later escaped the war with her young family to Moscow. After her children had all grown, Katja joined them in the United States and started classes with Intercambio in 2014. Since that time, she's come a long way. With a better understanding of English, she was able to move out of her daughter's house, get her driver's license, and find a better job. After working hard to improve her English and living in the United States for many years, Katja became a U.S. citizen in February of 2020. She felt comfortable reading, writing, and answering all the questions on the exam because of her confidence in her English. So Katja has really taken advantage of living in the U.S., and she's traveled with her children to several places, including Las Vegas, Chicago, Washington, D.C., New Mexico, Niagara Falls, and of course, New York, where she was able to see the Statue of Liberty while experiencing her newfound sense of freedom and opportunity in the U.S. For today's offering, please remain seated as you are, and the ushers will come to you during the musical interlude which follows. For those of you joining us remotely, you can make a donation now using the link posted in our chat by sending a check to UUCB and scanning the QR code on the next slide with your mobile phone. I invite you to give as generously as you are able. May our gifts be used to enact justice and bring peace and love to the Boulder community.
The oldest and longest relationship we're all going to have is with ourselves. And I invite you to recommit to it with curiosity, with compassion, watching out for the dark patterns, and knowing that even though Brian's going to try and mess with you from time to time, you make it through to the other side. Amen.
Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way. Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way.
Thank you all who have gathered here this morning. We invite those who are joining us online, please stay with us in the Zoom rooms for online fellowship and discussion.
Oh, Brian, let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart, the way of the heart shine through. Let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart, let the way of the heart shine through.